Welcome back to our series on identifying your blind spots. Today we're pivoting to a fun topic, the topic of humor and its benefits and potential challenges in using it with your clients today. I'm Peter McGraw. I'm a behavioral economist and business school professor at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I've spent a lot of time cracking the humor code, written books about it. I actually have a lab called the Humor Research Lab, aka HURL, and looking forward to this conversation today. I'm very fortunate to be joined by Karen Coyne, a financial advisor. Welcome, Karen.
Hello, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your background before we jump into this very fun topic.
So I've been in this business about 25 years now. I am in Maryland, and my practice is clarity planning with Raymond James. I also host a podcast called Money Without Math, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to being here today.
And Karen, one of the things that make you the perfect guest for this conversation, especially having listened to your podcast, is that you are a fun person. That this business can be very serious, especially lately, as you know, and you're not afraid to lean into a bit of humor, lean into a bit of levity, to enjoy your conversations, your clients, in a business that tends to be a little buttoned up, a little bit traditional, and often sometimes a little risk averse when it comes to
Right.
the connection part of this. How did that
Yes.
start for you?
Uh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. I think I've always been comfortable with that side of the self-deprecating, the kind of, being silly, making light of myself, maybe in some cases to make others feel more comfortable. And over time, that's grown to less of, I don't have to be ridiculous. I'm not a jester, but
Right.
right. But I can be human, and I can show that things are messy. And we can, talk as clients and colleagues about how things are hard. We don't have to pretend like everything's great. Oh, this is a buying opportunity. This is fabulous. And
Hmm.
not examine the other elements that are with it. So I think for me a big part of just is a part of it is just owning and recognizing the messiness of it all, not just the markets, but our lives,
Yes.
all the elements that come into play.
Yes, the human condition. So a preview for the listener, we're going to talk about what makes things funny, but do not be worried if you're like, I don't think I can be funny. I don't think I have it. I'm not that person. Because we're going to also talk about thinking funny, about how you can learn from the world's funniest people to build a better brand, to better connect with your clients, to operate in this world a little bit more effectively as a professional, as even as an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, and so on.
Mm.
So, Karen, I think you fortunately recognized this early as kind of part of having interacted with you prior to this. It's sort of who you are, right? You're bringing your most authentic self into the workplace, into these conversations with clients, because you like to enjoy your conversations in your life without your blazer on, right? That's
Right. Yes, yes, but it wasn't always like that. Having started my career, it was right around 2000. And even back then, I remember when I very first started that I didn't even want to wear open-toed shoes. It just felt like
God forbid. Whoa.
right, God
Oh.
forbid, right? How much things have changed. I mean, now, and I know in some offices, guys still wouldn't imagine showing up to work without a suit and a tie,
Mhm.
but it's certainly more relaxed in other environments. But I think of that as a parallel to the world that we live in, the business world that we live in, and again, just the world at large, all these human elements. And that is, the world is changing. Things are a little bit more relaxed. I think there is a hunger and a craving for just humanity, to know that we're dealing with another human and not a robot,
Right.
especially with this ever-present AI that's around us. I think now more than ever, it's just really, really important to showcase that you are not a robot.
Yes, indeed. And for those guys who are wearing a double-breasted and a vest right now, apologies for just being in a button down. Uh, but one of the nice things about humor is how it makes the world a more enjoyable place, right? So humor's good for us, laughter is good for us, the positive emotions of experiencing something funny is biologically good for us. People who are humorous, who can do comedy effectively, are well liked, right? So we tend to like funny people in the world, and when they can do it well, they can be quite adept at a lot of social situations.
Mm.
In terms of injecting a bit of levity into a heavy moment, perhaps, in terms of getting a feeling of connection. I understand you. We share the same perspectives and values.
Hmm.
And then lastly is that humor can be a very useful mechanism for coping. And so you actually shared a story with me about one of your clients during the sort of meltdown of the pandemic who was using humor as a way to cope with her portfolio. What was that?
Yes.
What was that like?
So, I mean, I'm so blessed. I love the clients I work with. A lot of them are also hilarious. So sometimes I feel ridiculous that I'm getting paid when 30 minutes will go by and I feel like my abs hurt from just laughing
Hmm.
for about 20, 30 minutes. But so it was during the meltdown, like you mentioned, early in 2020 when the markets were just tanking very quickly and kind of similar to what we're going through right now. And I was like, I'm going to call and check in on some people in particular that I think might need a little extra hand holding.
Hmm.
And, the one woman that I called, she picked up the phone. I don't even think she said, "Hi, Karen. Hello. Who is this?" She picked up the phone and she said, are you calling me because the world is a blankety blank right now? And so of course after that, we both just bust into laughing. We just burst into laughter and then had a conversation about kind of the ridiculousness of the world and the situation that we were in.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I think that was a really necessary, helpful tool. Talk about coping, right? Like when we had no
Yes.
idea what was going to be ahead, we knew that things were already looking to be very difficult, and that just allowed us to have an important conversation in a really difficult time.
Yeah, and I think there's a nice lesson in that, especially for the person who feels like they're not that funny or doesn't who already intuits that there's a bit of a risk around comedy, which I'll talk about in a moment. But one of it was you let her be funny, right? Like you
Mm.
then read the room, so to speak, and were able to lean into this moment of
Mm.
levity and say, yeah, that's why I'm calling, right?
Exactly.
And then of course, I think this is, my guess is that you then had a very serious conversation in some ways about what's happening and what are the proper responses, the proper perspectives. Are you taking a long run approach? What is it that you know as the expert that she may not know as the client?
Right.
Um, and
Yes.
and and balance this experience, right? Because as
Mm.
you said, I think one of the big challenges of trying to be funny is you're not a clown. You're not here to entertain them. You're here to enjoy your life, right? You're here to enjoy your interactions. These are people, and when we crave humanity, and there's nothing more human than comedy.
Yeah, I like that. I certainly don't feel like I have to be funny all the time, and I do have a
Mhm.
lot of hilarious clients. So maybe it is just the leaning into reading the room, like you said, and letting them work the stage because I think they're hilarious.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. So, one of the things that's really fascinating is this question of what actually makes something funny.
Mm.
And this is an age-old question. It goes back to Aristotle and Plato. And I'll be honest, people way smarter than me have been trying to crack the humor code for 2,000 plus years. Freud wrote about it, Immanuel Kant, Thomas Hobbes, as well as a lot of very funny people who have their own theories of humor. The work that we've done in the Humor Research Lab suggests that what is funny, the things we laugh at, the things we say, hey, that's funny, that amuses me, that creates this positive emotion, are things that have simultaneously have two perspectives.
Mm.
They are wrong yet okay. They are threatening yet safe. And what we translate that into is this very fancy term, a benign violation.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things about it is that actually humor comes from dark places. It
Yeah.
actually comes from something that's not right. It's actually harder to make jokes about a bull market than a bear market. That is that the things that we tend to laugh at, there's something amiss, there's something wrong, but we have another perspective that is okay in some way.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, when you said the two different things, the first thing that came to my mind was absurd yet true.
right. So yeah, so a lot of comedians say it's funny because it's true, right? That's the thing that makes it okay, so to speak.
Mm,
That's not always the case, but that is a heuristic that can often work, right? In that way. And so, for example, just like think about something like play fighting or tickling. These are harmless attacks, right? So those are sort of the evolutionary roots of humor. Wordplay, right? You misuse a word from one perspective, but it makes sense from another perspective, like being punny, so to speak. And so the takeaway though from this is that sometimes being funny, you're really trying to thread this needle, right? You're trying to find the appropriate level of wrongness or violation, the appropriate level of okayness or benignness.
right.
And that depends on the person, their
Time.
mood. That's right. Their location. Are they in a church or a comedy club? Right? You know what I mean? So it's a lot harder to make a joke about your portfolio that's in a bear market when you've just looked at it, for example. And so, and one of the other takeaways from this is there's two ways that you can fail, right? You can get a yawn-worthy response,
Mm,
boring jokes, most knock-knock jokes, right? The violations are too small for it to be really funny, or you get the negative emotion, right? You get the outrage or anger or disgust. You've gone too far. And
mm,
so, there's a reason that the most skilled people in the world, comedians, um, are able to do this, right? Because they're really good at threading that line. They're also really good at experimenting and trying out their jokes in a sense. And then they also have the advantage of doing it in a comedy club where people
mm.
expect to laugh, the alcohol's flowing, you know, uh, and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
That are there. So to this point about it's easier to make a joke about a bear market than a bull market. One of the levers that kind of helps make some of these violations benign is distance, right? So, for example, when bad things happen to people you don't like, it's easier to laugh about them when they happen to you or your loved ones. But time, right? The classic too soon, right? So you can imagine making a joke about what's happening today in the market and a client saying too soon, right? So it's a lot easier, to make the jokes about the past crises than it is about the present crisis, for example. So this notion of kind of timing, Karen, is this something you take into account as you're interacting with clients? And to what degree do you feel like I know when it's okay to inject a bit of levity into a conversation, especially when it's coming from you first rather than from the other
Mm,
person?
yeah, I don't know that I could spell it out, for example, as a process, but my
Yeah.
feeling is that a lot of it is what you referred to earlier, which is reading the room.
Hmm.
So really just leaning into how is my client feeling? What's the energy I'm getting from them today? And even if it's someone, for example, who normally is light and bright, but I can feel that they're really not
Yes.
in that place today, I'm going to shift my energy. And, maybe subconsciously with the goal of getting us out of there, like we can touch down. I always say, like, we can touch down and we can sit at rock bottom, but we can't camp out there. We don't want to live there. We
Hmm.
can, we can feel those feelings and then let's try to climb our way out. But so a big part of it, I think, is reading the room, feeling that energy, and sometimes it might just call for a little more compassion and maybe a little less humor, and just depending on the day. But like you said, I mean, I think my general mo is to bring a little levity. No matter what, so it's generally going to be there in the wings, at least.
Yeah, I mean, certainly building trust also has to matter here. Like that these people trust you, they understand you, you understand them. And so again, I actually don't suggest that everybody should be funnier, right? It is important to understand what are your strengths and what are your limitations when it comes
Hmm.
to this stuff. And where I've gone with this idea, and I'm curious to get your reactions to some of this, is that you never have to be funny to take advantage of the process of creating comedy, right? So if you think about it, the world's funniest people were not actually born as funny as they are now, right? So the world's best comedians are not 19-year-old savants. They're not prodigies, right? We don't
Mm,
have 13-year-olds who are doing stand-up comedy, right? It takes years, right? They're in their 30s and 40s often
right. It
in
takes
this
life
case.
experience and getting punched in the face. I mean, I think that's a big part of it.
Yes. And so yeah, and there's a learning process. So the world's funniest people, they create sort of practices. They have perspectives, and they work on them and they develop those things.
Mm,
And what I think is very useful for people in the world of business is that they can borrow from those practices and perspectives, apply them to business, not to comedy.
uh-huh.
But given how difficult it is to do comedy, and given how difficult it is to do business, and how much novelty, right, how much creativity matters in these endeavors, I think that we can bridge that gap, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about next.
Mm,
So it's not
yeah.
about being funny; it's about
Right.
thinking in this sense.
Yeah. Right. And how much of that is, just owning your own the flaws and struggles. I mean, that's been
Yes.
my observation is that, to your point about there not being 10-year-old, uh, comedians on tour. It's the ones that usually they're sharing like these terrible things that happened, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so I think there's a big element of just being comfortable in your own skin.
Yes.
Would your research
And
back some of that up, or is that connected?
well, certainly, if you think about it, right, like you have kind of two perspectives that you can take, right? Like you can recognize that we're all flawed, we all have challenges, and actually in many ways those are the things that are really important in the world,
Mm,
right? And or you could just say everything's fine, I'm perfect, I don't make mistakes, everything's good, it will always be good. And um that's just not authentic. The people know that the world is messy, right?
right.
And they know that people um, have challenges. They have bad days, not just their portfolio, but themselves in
Yes.
that sense. And so it allows you to create a connection, right? Because um, I can see myself in you, right? I can recognize that, oh, you were going to be honest with me,
Mm,
right? Because you're willing to be vulnerable, right? You're willing to be authentic. I can then be authentic and vulnerable with you. I can open up and tell you what are my concerns, what are my fears, what are my desires, what are my dreams. I don't have to be embarrassed by those things. If there's anyone in the world I need to be able to tell these things to, is my financial advisor, because
yes.
because you're there to help me achieve those dreams and avoid those fears. Yeah.
Yes. And, when I'm meeting with someone and they're looking for a financial advisor, so maybe they're
Hmm.
speaking to me, they're speaking to other people, and, and a lot of times they're asking me questions that they've pulled off of some listicle, like about
Mm,
how long you've been in the business and are you
right.
fiduciary, yada yada. And and they're like, well, we're going to meet, these other people. Are there any other questions that you think I should ask? And, I always encourage them to consider, is this someone the person that I'm hiring, is this someone that I can call and share like my worst fears, my best news. This person is going to be one of the first people that you call with your major life events. And so if you
Mhm.
are going to be concerned about meeting with them because you don't feel comfortable, you feel shamed when you meet with them, you feel belittled, or you don't feel visible or seen at all, no, you're not going to feel comfortable making those calls and scheduling those meetings. And then that relationship is not going to benefit you because you're not fully showing up. And so maybe I'm going off on a tangent a little bit from humor, but to bring it back, I think it's that it's so important. I think it's more important than maybe advisors realize. And again, I mean, I haven't set out intentionally to be funny, but I think I do try to just let people in on the fact that I'm human too, and that it is a safe place, when we're speaking and meeting, and that it's okay, when things go
Right.
sideways, and things will go sideways. We talk about that up front, like markets will go sideways, life won't go according to plan. And certainly in those situations, it is helpful to work with people who have a sense of humor. But all of
Yeah.
that was to say, like, look, that's an element that I think people should be looking for in their financial advisor. Is this someone I feel
Mm.
comfortable with? And certainly humor can help bridge some of that gap.
Yeah, and I think even what you're touching on is even more broadly bringing your authentic self to these interactions, and
Sure.
people are craving authenticity in a world that is too often pushing that aside. Uh, and when my experience, and I think a lot of people watching this will have this experience, is like when you're a financial advisor, yes, you dispense financial advice, but you're also sometimes a therapist. Sometimes you're a life coach. There's a lot of kind of roles that go in there. I remember having to talk to both my therapist and my financial advisor about buying a car, right? Like I needed permission from both of those people to spend this amount of money. And my financial advisor, she's been with me for many years. She understands my psyche as well as my therapist does, and she gave me
Mm.
exactly the same advice, right? But her said you can afford it, and it sounds like you really want to do it.
Mm.
Like it was, she just kind of gave me a little bit of the nudge that I needed, outside of the very like, okay, you have enough money, go ahead if you want. You know what I mean? I don't care
Right,
what
but you're going to
decisions.
decrease your future, forward earnings of, yeah,
Yes,
right.
right. You know what I mean? And so I think that element's there. Now, this, of course, the business of being a financial advisor is a business, right? So some people, um, work for a big corporation. Some people are a solopreneur, but in any case, you are building a brand, right? That's
Mm.
what we're really talking about here. Karen Coyne is the kind of advisor who you can joke with, right? She's the kind of advisor who will listen deeply, to your troubles, and she's not, and by the way, that might not be the right advisor for some people who are like, just the facts, ma'am. Right.
Exactly. That's 100% correct. Yes. I'm so glad you said that. And it's funny because our onboarding letter, so you become a client, we send
Okay.
a little note that says, "Welcome aboard, Peter." The very first sentence says, "While we may laugh a lot in our
Ah.
calls and in our meetings, working with you is something that we do not take for granted." Uh,
Hmm.
and that line, that first sentence is there because it's true. All of it,
Yeah.
we do laugh a
Important.
lot with our clients,
Hmm.
and uh, have just wonderful, wonderful, rich conversations. And of course, we take very seriously the responsibility that we have in working together.
Indeed. Yeah, that's wonderful. So one of the things about comedians are they're not for everyone, right? So the comedians that you love and the comedians I love may not be the same. Actually, the comedians you love, I might be like, ugh, no, and vice versa, right?
Right.
Because because if we go back to the benign violation theory, what is wrong and what is okay, what is a violation and what is benign, depends on the audience, right? It depends on their values and their
Mm,
beliefs and their mood and so on. And so what the best comedians do is they recognize that I need to make my audience laugh, and if other people are yawning or outraged, that's okay. I
right.
actually need to do this, right?
Yes.
So I call it in my book Shtick to Business, I call this create a chasm,
Uh,
right? So there's the audience in front of me roaring with laughter, enjoying the experience, and the people outside the comedy club,
they're not your people.
they're not my people. That's exactly right.
They're not your
And
people. And
so
this is a concept I think a lot of advisors have a really hard time with. So I'm really glad you're
okay,
bringing this up, because I think advisors by nature, part of it is we want to help people. And so
yes.
it's painful when someone is not our person, and they don't
Yes.
get us, or they don't get our style, our brand.
Right.
I just feel like there's a natural tendency of advisors to want to work with people and have a really hard time both when people aren't their people and in releasing existing clients who aren't a good.
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. So the metaphor I like to use is you're serving tea. So in a world where some people like iced tea and some people like hot tea, if you serve everybody warm tea to try to make everyone happy, you make no one happy.
Right.
And so you've touched on this idea. You have to figure out, am I hot tea or am I iced tea? And then you can then serve the iced tea customers if you're iced tea, or the hot tea customers if you're hot tea.
Hmm.
And you just have to let someone else serve that market, right?
Yes.
This is my market. And to
Yes.
understand, and one of the best places to start is the comedian start with, who laughs at my jokes already? What are those people like? Right? So
Hmm.
who are your best clients? Who do you connect with the most, and why? What is it about this relationship that works? Is it that you're a just the facts ma'am style advisor, or you're a little bit more relaxed with regard to that? Understanding what is it that, are you the person who's in the double breasted and the vest, right? In the very traditional sense, or do you wear a t-shirt? You know what I mean? And your
Right.
clients are like, cool. You know what I mean? This
Yes.
person, this is the kind of person that is my advisor. But the key is, the worst thing, I think, and it's no way to live, and it's no way to be successful, is to be the person who wants to wear the t-shirt but keeps wearing the double-breasted.
100%. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And we live in a world where, again, the world has changed. It's not just a double-breasted world anymore. There is
That's right.
room for t-shirts at the table.
That's right.
It is not the same world that, for those of us who have been in the business for a while, it's
Yes.
changed. It's loosened up a little.
And one of the things that we've covered in some previous episodes of this series is this rise of single living, right?
Hmm.
So, again, you could be very careful, I believe, as a financial advisor, defaulting into an old script, a 1960s style script, which is everybody's going to get married, everybody's going to have kids, right? You're going to have a particular type of breadwinner, a particular type of decision maker, and so on. And I have to ask you, are you seeing this, what I'm seeing, this rise of single living, this rise of women in particular, single or not, who are taking much more control over their economic lives. They're living kind of non-traditionally in some ways. And yet this old style, this very traditional style, there wasn't like a script for singles. There wasn't a script for women as
Right.
much.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's always been a kind of beef of mine with coming up in this business. Everything is built around couples. Everything just assumes,
Mm,
I shouldn't say everything, a lot. A lot of what we learn is built for the couple, the married unit.
yes.
And we get far less education on advising for the solo client.
Hmm.
I've had to learn a lot of it just on my own. And yes, because I have seen this through my whole career, that, I've worked with clients, whether they were divorced, never been married, maybe same sex, maybe whether same sex or not partnered, but had no desire to become married. And,
Hmm.
as you know, there are some specific planning considerations that are actually more important if you are not married, because you don't have those defaults built in.
Yes.
And I
Right.
recently did a couple podcast episodes on my show about this, to talk about specifically some of those planning considerations. So I think
Hmm.
being aware of these things as an advisor can also be a way to, your point of, differentiating yourself and finding your people. If this is something you are aware of, well versed in, and can speak to some of these planning challenges and concerns, that can go a long way, because many, not just advisors, but just professionals are not, I think, well versed in some of these issues.
Yes, indeed. And so you have been developing a personal brand, right? One that can directly attract a particular type of client. So your podcast is called Money Without Math,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I mean that sends a message. And what is that message as you kind of have designed your place in the marketplace to find
Yeah.
your ideal client?
Right. Well, it's, to your point about finding your people and strictly business. I mean, I think you can tell just by talking to me for 15 minutes or probably 2 minutes that I'm not going to be strictly business. And it's
Uh,
not just going to be charts and graphs and industry, economic updates and forecasts and what I call wah, 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 like from Peanuts.
uh,
Remember the Peanuts teacher voice?
oh yes, yes.
Um, I think for a lot of people, that's what it sounds like. When we drone on and on about beta and alpha and performance this and that, it's what do they hear? They hear wah, 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 wah.
Right.
And that's terrible. That's boring. That does not make for a very good client experience. So the brand and Money Without Math came from a place of, I don't want that. I'm not, if I can't define what I crystal clear know that I do want, I can crystal clearly define what I don't want. And what I don't want
Right.
is that. I don't want to be the person that's just trying to predict, forecast, or talk about, economic predictions, risk measures, and performance. I want to talk about the nitty gritty, the things that happen to us in our daily lives that are real and raw and authentic. And
Yes.
sometimes they might be funny, sometimes they might be philosophical, sometimes they might be quite practical. I want to talk
Yeah.
about all of those things. So that's where that came from.
Yes. So here we are. We've talked about the value of humor, how difficult it can be to be humorous, that not everybody's a natural in it. But to read the room, pay attention. What are those relationships like? Might there be moments where we can have a moment of levity, even in a world that feels very serious at the moment? And that we might be able to actually even learn from these very funny people, not to be funnier, but to think funnier in a sense. And so
Hmm.
the create a chasm is a nice example of that. You have to understand that you're not for everyone. And if you try to be the financial planner for everyone, you're going to be a good financial planner for no one in that sense.
Mm.
Your Money Without Math brand, I think, is a very nice example of another lesson that I want to talk about. And so I'll start with a story. And not so long ago, Chris Rock, one of the great stand-up comedians, one of my favorite comedians, had a Netflix special called Tambourine. And in Tambourine, he talked about his family, his daughter in particular, and he took her to like her junior high school, and they had like an assembly with all the
Oh, yes, yes,
principals.
yes. I know where you're going.
And the principal said, we have a strict no bullying policy. If someone bullies, they get immediately taken out of school. And you would expect a parent to be happy to hear that. And Chris Rock said, I wanted to take my daughter out of that school.
Mm,
And his logic was that preparing your children for life, parents do half the work and bullies do the other half of the work. Right. And he gets a laugh from this, he gets an applause break, and so on.
God.
Because what he says is that the world is tough out
Yeah,
there. And if you coddle your kids, they're not going to be prepared for the real world, which has real bullies in it.
yeah.
So, what is Chris doing here besides being funny? He's using a technique that is like comedy 101. I call it the reversal,
Mm,
right? So you do the opposite. You say the opposite of what is appropriate, what is expected. And so what I like about the reversal is that most people outside of the world of comedy never think in reverse. That is, they never think about doing the opposite thing. Now, it's no guarantee that doing the opposite thing will be useful, but it's a useful exercise. It's a useful endeavor, right?
yes.
That's there. So, you were saying about vulnerability and about being able to go into these dark places and so on. Chris Rock's contemporary and friend Neil Brennan never was as funny on stage as Chris Rock. He lacks Chris's charisma,
Mm.
right? But Neil Brennan is a very good joke writer. And so he came out with a Netflix special called Three Mics. And in one of the mics, he did one liners. One of the mics, he did traditional stand up like Chris Rock does. And the third mic, He did emotional stuff, is what he called it. He actually just told stories and made no jokes.
Hmm.
And this ended up being an incredible special. Actually, it gets higher ratings on Netflix
Wow.
than Chris Rock's,
Hmm.
because what Neil did was he did a reversal, right? He did a comedy special that didn't all have jokes in it. And he was very vulnerable, and it made you understand why he's a bit of a serious character.
Huh.
He took what I call a bug and made it into a feature,
Hmm.
right? So when you think about applying the reversal in general and the specifics of turning a bug into a feature, you actually can find businesses that have done this.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, Patagonia came up with an ad campaign where they talked about, this is a company that cares about sustainability. They had a "Do not buy this jacket" campaign. So they ran ads featuring their jacket and said, "Do not buy this."
Hmm.
Right? Complete opposite of what you would normally say, which is, "Look how great our jacket is."
Right.
But it was on brand for them. Do you really need a jacket? If you know what I mean? If you
Hmm.
don't, skip it, right? Save the planet, skip it. But if you do, we make good jackets. Well, their sales went up by
Of
telling people
course.
to do that.
Yes.
Buckley's, this cough syrup, this is a Canadian cough syrup, was
Huh.
sitting at number 9 in the marketplace. Right? So as you might imagine, being 9 in the marketplace is, and the Canadian marketplace is terrible, right? Well, Buckley's had a problem, and that is that their cough syrup tastes awful, right? It tastes really, really bad. So imagine being at Buckley's and you're like, well, how do we solve this? Well, we could put sugar in it. We could add cherry flavor, right? We could do all these kinds of things. They decided to turn the bug, the awful taste of their cough syrup, into a feature. And
Uh-huh.
they ran a campaign that says it tastes awful and it works, right? The idea is that
Genius.
cough syrup should taste awful if it's
Right.
actually doing what it should be doing. And they went from
Yeah.
9 to number 1 in the
But,
marketplace.
and what my takeaway when I hear that too is I'm thinking like they own it. They own who they are.
Yes,
They own what they're good at. They know what they're
right.
not good at. And then they broadcast it.
And so money without math is a reversal, right? If you think about it, right? The norm thing is, look at these charts, alpha, beta, right? Running Monte Carlo simulations, math, 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 math.
Yep.
And yet not everyone is a math person, and that there are ways to share your lessons without the math and give good advice without the math, and so on, and it attracts that type of client.
Right. Yeah, I'm big on reversal. I mean, you can see if you're seeing the video, like this is my office. When when I was moving into this office space, I said I do not want any dark furniture. I don't
Hmm.
want like, green walls. I don't want any certificates. I don't want any of the traditional vestiges of, what a financial professional advisor office looks like. All the furniture is white. It's light and
Yes.
bright, and you walk in and I mean it looks and feels different. So
Yeah.
I
Where's the mahogany?
right, no,
Right?
zero mahogany, zero
Yeah. So
certificates.
yeah. So you are living the life of the reversal, right? So you're
It's
channeling
in my
this.
DNA. I love the reversal.
Yes, that's right. So what I often suggest to business professionals is, you have a puzzle, you have a problem, you have a dilemma, you need to shake things up, things aren't working. One of the ways to think in reverse is a particular form of brainstorming that I've invented. So if you think about it, brainstorming is way overrated. It actually doesn't end up working very well, in
Mm,
part because the act of brainstorming, you self-censor yourself, right? You say, "Oh, that's not a good idea," or other people will laugh at that idea, and so on. So
mm.
as a warm-up to any sort of problem solving or brainstorming, I suggest that the you get your team together, your advisors, people who know you, who work with you, and to do a brainstorming session. But it's a brainstorming in reverse. I call it shitstorming. And in it, you purposely brainstorm bad
The
ideas,
worst ideas.
the worst ideas possible. The, the more terrible, the better, right? So, first of all, it's a lot of fun,
That's
right? It's an
genius.
enjoyable thing. It gets the creative juices flowing, and so on.
Yeah.
And you don't self-censor, right?
Yes.
Like you never, right? You're there, and so it's like a great little warm up, and it has this really exciting possibility.
It
You
opens
have
up
a
that
sense,
pathway, right?
like,
Like,
oh yes, and on occasion, someone says something, and you go, you know what? That's not the worst idea I've ever heard. You know what I mean?
right.
Like, oh my God, that might actually work,
Right.
right?
I love that.
So you're just like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm creating an office. What are the bad ideas? Well, I'm gonna have disco balls, and I'm gonna have whatever, et cetera, right? Like, these kinds of things. And then you go, well, okay, we're not gonna have a disco ball, but what if we had a place that seemed fun, right? That was bright and was light and was cheerful, rather
Hmm.
than so very serious with my, double-breasted and vest, right? A lot of mahogany, right, in
Uh-huh.
that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so that is like, how is it that you can actually start to teach yourself to think in reverse? No
Mhm.
promises that it'll work, but when it does, no one else has thought about this, right? You get to really stand out and be different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart. That's so clever.
Well, Karen, I knew that this was going to be an enjoyable and informative conversation. As you reflect on what we've talked about, is there some key takeaway that you would want a financial advisor to kind of start with as they step away from this conversation?
This has been really fun, Peter, and I've learned a lot, so thank you. I think for me, something that just really strikes me, we're hearing so much about AI and how that's going to change business, every business. And my feeling is that it's never been more important than it is now to just show that you're a human and to be a good human. And certainly
Hmm.
humor is part of that. So like we've talked about, I don't think it's that you have to learn how to crack the perfect joke or master your comedic timing, or work on your puns, any of that. But just by embracing really who you are, sometimes the absurdity of life and the situations that we live in and that we're facing, just showing up with that, armed with that, can make you a better advisor. I truly, truly believe that.
Yeah, I think that's outstanding. And for the person listening or watching today, if you want to learn more about what Karen does and her perspective, I think a great place to start is her really wonderful podcast, Money Without Math, and you can find that on Spotify.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this conversation too. I think I would end with this idea of, if you're good at telling jokes, do it, read the room. If you're not good at telling jokes, you don't have to tell a joke. You can actually learn from the masters of comedy. You can think funny, whether that be really honing in on who you are, what is your personal brand, recognizing that you're not going to be for everyone as long as you are really the right person for some of the marketplace that's there. And if you like these lessons, you can check out many, many more of them in my book, Stick to Business, what the masters of comedy can teach you about being fearless, breaking the rules, and building a serious career. This has been a really great series. I enjoy talking about the rise of single living and the unique needs that single clients have, about this great transfer of wealth that's happening. And then I think that the timing of this particular episode with some of the challenges that we're having in the marketplace is a good reminder that we need to find ways to enjoy our life, make the right decisions, and connect with the people who are going to best support us. And so thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this series, whether it's talking about the rise of single living and the unique needs that single clients have, some of the considerations with this great wealth transfer that is forthcoming, and then today's episode especially enjoyable, talking about the value of humor, the value of levity, the value of thinking differently, and really making authentic connections with clients that benefit both them and your professional endeavors. Thank you very much.